Couple comments from our listeners. Penny writes, wow, good mothering, allowing your daughter to get angry at you and to listen to her. So Penny loves that. So does Victoria. Hey, Victoria. Allison writes, great podcast, a great mom and strong woman to think for herself. David writes, others have doubts, but don't mention them because they're afraid of being treated as she was. And that's true. How many Mormons, struggling, questioning, doubting Mormons live in silence because they are petrified as to how their spouse, because as tough as it was with Bill, he didn't kick you out. He didn't divorce you. No. And your kids haven't, become estranged from you. So in that sense, you, even as hard as it has been for you, Anna, you were fortunate. And there are other people that live in fear. There are other people that come out and lose their marriages, get divorced, become estranged from their kids, lose their jobs. That's kind of why Mormon stories exist. But then there's others that are just so scared to even come out that they keep all this inside. And can you just imagine how toxic that is to your mental health, to your anxiety, to your depression? I
tried it for a year, so I know.
What does that do? What does that do to just keep it inside, Anna?
No, it's terrible. It's terrible. I felt like a hypocrite. I felt like a liar. I felt like every aspect of my life was nothing but a lie. And I'm a very honest person normally. I wear my heart on my sleeve. And so for me to be a whole year deceptive like that, it was awful. And that was only 1 year. I don't know how, but there apparently are people who can do that. That's fine.
For most people, it wrecks their mental health.
I think it would. Yeah.
It can drive you to even suicidality. Just being
yeah. I mean, it's just, I think it's so important to live your truth, I feel so much better now, and even if all those horrible things that you said would have happened, I mean, that would have been terrible, but I still think I would have done it.
It would have been better than living a lie.
Yes.
And internalizing all these fears and doubts and disbeliefs and concerns.
Yes. I mean, at least that's how I am. I could not, I know other people have different constraints, and it's in some ways more difficult in Utah, and in other ways maybe easier because you have other people.
Yeah. Salt Lake is the best place in the world to be an ex-Mormon because you've got tens of thousands of ex-Mormons here that you can have coffee with or go out and meet and become friends with and create a support community with. And that's one of the reasons it's important for us to do these stories of people outside the United States, because we just forget that we've got all these Mormons all over the world that are impacted by what Joseph Smith did and what the church leaders now do, who don't have a lot of the resources and support. And along those lines, Victoria, who we love, she's a top fan. She's in the UK and she writes, no one here really understands either. This is so nice for her to have a place that she can relate to other people. So your story is reached Victoria. Amy, hi, Amy Germer. She writes, Mormons don't own a trademark on morality. That's very true. Yeah. And I just want to add one thing, and this has not come from a place of anything other than sincerity. If you had cancer, you would go to an oncologist or a radiologist. If you had diabetes, or if you had, problems with your digestion, you'd go to a specialist. A mixed faith marriage and a faith crisis is every bit of a specialty as obsessive compulsive disorder or an eating disorder or post-traumatic stress disorder. If you are going through a faith crisis and you go to some Mormon therapist who was brought on by by the family, what are they called? Oh, I'm forgetting the name. The social services.
Yes.
Yeah. LDS Social Services, LDS Family Services. They're going to just tell you, read the scriptures, pray, have faith, go to church, and it'll get better. And that's not going to help. It's not ethical, let alone useful for a mental health professional to make those sorts of suggestions. But if you go to a Oh, and by the way, if that believing therapist has never gone through a faith crisis, then if they're counseling a mixed faith couple, they're going to tend to side with the believer. And by the way, sometimes disclose inappropriately to the bishop or stake president. And the non-believer is going to be totally unsafe and misunderstood by that believing therapist. But the other problem is if you go to a non-Mormon therapist or a never Mormon therapist, sometimes you'll luck into getting a good one. But many of these never Mormon therapists are just going to go, this whole religion thing's dumb. Like, why are you even believing it at all? And, or they'll say things like to you, lots of religions have problems, Protestants, Presbyterians, people believe different things. Why is this such a big divide? Unless you are a therapist who's been through both the Orthodox point of view and the doubting, disbelieving point of view, it's going to be really hard for you to be an effective therapist to someone who's going through a faith crisis, and especially in a mixed faith marriage. So this is why I got my PhD. This is why I do faith crisis coaching, mixed faith marriage coaching. This is why Margie's doing coaching. This is why Natasha Elfer Parker and so many other people are specialists in this work. Please do not trust a never doubting, believing Mormon therapist. And please don't trust your marriage to a never Mormon. Go to a specialist who specializes in Mormon faith crisis work and or in mixed faith marriage work. Because again, you would never trust a heart surgery to a podiatrist, right? I would never recommend someone with PTSD to a generalist psychologist or a social worker. This is the type of work that's technical enough to need a specialist. And I just believe in that strongly enough where I've given my life to this work. So I hope
this is why I contacted you, because you were the only one that I knew that could do that. But having said that, we were lucky with this therapist that he actually did understand. Sometimes, he would side with Bill in this. It was actually an interesting thing. He would sometimes side with me whenever it came to specifically Mormon things, because he thought that was all silly. But he would side with Bill when it was more general faith things, because he was a believer, or he is a believer. So one time we actually had a discussion about evolution, which I found rather silly, but those were small moments. He did have, so I would say occasionally this can happen, that you find somebody good. And if it's not good, then you should get out of there. It's like I did with my first therapist who didn't understand me, so, but there are certain things, like especially like that have specifically to do with mixed faith things that I felt like it was so much different when I talked to you, because you really understood and helped me, and also listened to other people's experiences. I listened later to lots of podcasts from your podcast, and there are some great stories where this would come out, where people would tell how they navigated that, and that helped me as well. So I did feel a little bit as part of a community again. And I have to say, when I wrote in the Mormon Stories community about Alina going on her mission and going through the problems she had in the mission, and there was such an outpouring of love from people that I really felt uplifted. People were, and people would go and visit Alina on Temple Square all the time. In fact, she would say, oh, this happens to me all the time, that some friends from my mom's Facebook community just come and visit me and bring me something. So I want to thank everyone that did this, especially Trisha. And she's gone like several times, but also Martine, actually, and others that have gone by and brought her stuff and helped her. And there were like all these people willing to go and rescue her when she was having problems. In the end, it wasn't necessary, but that I think what was really great.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I'm glad you were able to receive the support that you needed.
I was, finally.
Yeah.
Yeah, little by little. So if you're there in the dark place, don't give up. It will get better.
Absolutely. Find a therapist or a coach, find a community, find a mentor, find a friend. You're not alone. You don't need to be alone. Reach out to me. You can email me at mormonstories@gmail.com, drjohndolin@gmail.com. I'll help you find a coach or a therapist. I'll help you find a community. I'll help you find someone near you. You can also always go to mormonspectrum.org/map. And there are Facebook and meetup groups all over the world that you can join to find.
Oh, you can write to me as well if you want to.
Yep.
I'm not a therapist.
And you go by Ana Leyendo
yes.
on Facebook. Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So where does your story go from here?
Well, I don't know. What else do you want to know?
So, yeah. So how have you and Bill weathered the mixed faith marriage? What have been your secrets to not getting divorced, frankly, and not hating each other? Because I always say I've met Bill, and I was a little bit scared to meet Bill just because I know that people sometimes perceive me as evil or satanic or whatever. And I found Bill to be very remarkably, he didn't agree with everything. He didn't just jump on board, but he was tolerant at a level for an Orthodox believer that I rarely see. He was even willing to attend that entire retreat in Switzerland that we did. And he stayed for the whole thing and listened to everything. And he wasn't disruptive. He was friendly. He treated me really well. So in some ways, Bill's kind of a remarkable guy.
Yeah, well, he thinks you're the most Mormon post-Mormon he's ever met.
That's true. I am.
Yeah. No, he really liked you. Well, yeah, it was difficult, but our therapist said also to us that we were both always, how can I say, willing to still work at it. Bill even more so maybe than I, because he just didn't want to give up on me, and he said there must be a way that we can figure this out. And I was more like, well, if this doesn't get any better, then I don't want to stay in this, because I just felt he couldn't accept me the way I was. And I also, granted, had a hard time accepting him, but I kept saying to myself, well, actually, I promised one of my kids, I said to her, I promise you, because they were afraid I was going to get divorced. We were going to get divorced. And I said, I promise you, I will try everything. And only if it doesn't work at all, then we will. And so whenever I wanted to give up, I thought, well, you could still try this. Maybe John could talk to Bill. Or maybe, we could, and then you recommended a really good book. It's called Getting the Love You Want. And I thought, okay, we'll work through the end of that book. And if it isn't better by then, but actually that book is really great. And between the therapy and this book and both of us just not giving up, it got a lot better. It just got a lot better. And, one of the things we learned in the therapy is to talk to each other more constructively. Like he would say, don't stay on this, what he called, it's like he said, it's off the main battlefield. You end up getting onto this other, you said, and I said, and no, you said, and it's your fault. And he says, that's not really what it's about. You need to always get back to what it's about. I am hurt here. This hurts me. And then the other person, oh, and this hurts me. And then you can actually connect, when you understand each other's hurt. And like when I understood in the therapy and I heard how deeply Bill was hurt by this, how he felt like I had betrayed him, stabbed him in the back, all his hopes and dreams he had. We were going to go on a mission. We were going to be together forever. All this I had just ruined, so to speak. And of course, I didn't look at it that way. I didn't feel like I had ruined it. I felt like I had found out it's not true. But that's how it looked to him. And so I started to have some compassion for him, and realized that it meant a lot that he was still willing to try. At one point, I remember saying in the therapy, well, maybe it's better you find yourself someone else and have another temple marriage and where you can have all this. And then he said, no, I'd rather be with you. And I thought, okay, and so those things meant a lot to me. I realized I was more important to him than the church, even though the church is so important to him. But then there was still the question, can I live with someone that believes these things? And that wasn't easy to answer either, because I thought it's foolish and how could he? But then I thought, well, I can accept my kids that way. Why can't I do it with him? I can accept some of my friends like that. And as long as I can be myself, I can be authentic, then it doesn't really matter what he believes, does it? So I started to be myself. I would drink a coffee. I would say the things that I thought, just openly, without always harping on the church, but just say, well, I didn't really like the name of the church now, being, you can't call it Mormon anymore. That's a bit silly. That's how I feel about it, and then he started to accept that more and more, and actually finds it kind of silly too. And so then as I felt like I could be more myself, it got better. Yeah. And I also did that with my kids, because at first there's like this big white elephant in the room. There's all this stuff you can't talk about anymore, and all this stuff that has to be just avoided. And I thought, I don't want to live like this. I really don't. I can be myself, and I'm their mother. They can accept me that way. And I started doing it with Bill's family as well. I wrote all of them a letter and explained why I don't believe anymore. Some of them didn't answer at all. Some of them answered very kindly and said, we still love you, and some, tried to convert me back and were just telling me that they were disappointed. But at least it was out, it was out in the open. And it wasn't this big thing that only was talked about behind my back. And even when I go back to church, I say things like, oh, I love Sunday. It's so relaxing when I can be at home and take a bath. And then these women were uncomfortable and they were saying, oh, we wish we could do that. And I said, well, you can do it. Nobody's keeping you from staying at home. And, and I would just say these things that were like these taboos you're not supposed to say. And it helps, because when you do it, then at least here, I don't know if it's the same in Utah, but here people respond too. And I make a joke, and then it's like, it becomes less of a taboo. In fact, Liam, my oldest son, was criticizing me for my coffee machine. He says, oh, that's not very high tech. It's just a small little thing. Don't you want to get a nice big thing? And to me, that was like a big step, that he said that.
He was teasing you.
Yeah, he was teasing me about it. He realized, well, his mom drinks coffee, but other than that, she's really the same as before. It's pretty much the only thing I've changed, or one of the very few things. And at least, outward small things, since I didn't really like alcohol.
Yeah, I want to just highlight, just in review, something that I noticed, which is that, it is true that some, people who lose their faith have affairs. It's also true that devout Orthodox Mormons have affairs. So in some sense, it's kind of a dumb thing to bring up, but this is extremely stressful for the marriage. And when you don't discover until your late 30s or 40s or 50s, all these problems, you don't want to blow up the marriage. You don't want to, wreck the family for your children. But this stuff can really drive a wedge between couples. And it can, and it's not like, I think everyone who doubts or questions or disbelieves would want to tell their spouse first. But if you fear your spouse is going to, divorce you or take the kids or malign you, you may not feel safe talking to the person that you should talk to most. And of course, that would drive someone to need to talk to somebody. Fortunately, you had Yuha, and you're not going to be cheating with Yuha anytime soon, right?
No.
Not everybody has Yuha, right?
I know. Everybody should have a Yuha.
Everybody should have a Yuha. I want my own Yuha. But
I'm not sharing. No, I'm just kidding.
What's that?
I said I'm not sharing.
Okay.
But I was only kidding.
Yeah, but of course there's infidelity. When you're driven to not be able to talk about the most sacred and important things in your life, or distressing or troubling or sad things, when you can't talk to your spouse about that, either because you're scared or they won't let you or they won't want you to, or they reject you when you try, then you're at risk because you're going to be confiding in other people. Exactly. And you'll develop feelings for them eventually in many instances. And I'm not justifying adultery affairs, but that's just reality. And by the way, if a believing spouse feels alienated, they're likely to cheat too, whether or not it comes out.
I think, and sometimes maybe, because some of the reasons why we got married, it was like, this was a returned missionary, this was a good candidate. And sometimes you do find out that this person is not a good match, and sometimes, and this is something that the therapist also, Bill, at first he was just like, get so upset at me that I would even say that. I said, maybe we don't match. And he would also say, look, we're going to go through this therapy and you may find out at the end that you do not, match each other or fit with each other, don't work out as a couple. And that's an okay path too, and so as it's turned out, and it's not the end yet, I don't know, but we have rediscovered that we have a lot in common, and it was like only just recently Bill said, and I think it's not just the woman who has to play a certain role in a patriarchal system, the man as well. And he was like always feeling like he had to look out for me, he had to protect me, he had to put his own needs on the back burner. And I said, no, now you need to find out what you want as well, and who you are. And that's really difficult still for him. I've already gone through this process, and that's probably what he also, for him, seen or perceived as being selfish. Because I was discovering what I actually want and who I actually am and what my wishes are and what makes me happy and what doesn't, etc. And wasn't just thinking what is right and wrong and what should I do and what shouldn't I do. And so that for him is also a new concept. And we're finding out as we're doing this is kind of rekindling our marriage, actually. But
yes,
for 4 years, it was looking like it was dying,
Yeah. And if you don't get help and support, it can definitely kill your marriage. But yes, that's why I named our new project, our new podcast, right, The Gift of the Mormon Faith Crisis. This can be the best thing that ever happens to your marriage, because all of a sudden you have to talk authentically. Exactly. You have to sort of let the old marriage die, and you don't want to let a marriage die. But in reality, you're different. Bill's different. The foundation of your marriage has crumbled, and you have to either let that marriage die and then say, Bill, here's who I am now. And Bill says, well, here's who I am now. And then you have to make a new marriage contract, which says, we can no longer base this marriage on mutual agreement and belief in the church. So exactly. Do you still want to be married to me? Do I still want to be married to you? And if so, what do we build our marriage upon if it's not on the church? And so many people have this misunderstanding that, we don't agree about the church anymore, so we have nothing in common. That's the dumbest, most ridiculous conclusion I've ever seen. You still believe in honesty, truth, kindness, children, family, love, health, intimacy. You still share 99% of your values and beliefs. It's just these symbols and myths and religious doctrines that are different. And in some ways, those seem massive, but in reality, they're very, very small.
In fact, I just this week, I think we were talking about it. He says, you just changed the rules, is how he put it. And I said, well, yes, I found out that some things were not real. The foundations of the church, you called it a myth. Exactly. They were not real. But I said to him, but some things are real. You are real. My kids are real. Our relationships are real. And I still believe in those, and I still have morals, and they're not that much different from how they were before. And in fact, that was actually, for me, a very interesting thing to figure out where my morals come from now. And like on each issue, I would think, what do I think? What feels right? What makes sense? What brings the most help or the most good to others? And what is the most hurtful? Whether it was especially sexuality, for example. And I told him, I said, I don't believe any more sexuality before marriage is wrong. Because if it's two consenting adults that want to have this, that's perfectly fine. It has nothing to do with morality. There's other issues, are they ready? Are they healthy? Are they protecting themselves so they don't bring children into the world that they're not ready for? And all these things. But it's not an issue, is it good or bad? But I said to him, to cheat on a spouse, that to me is still immoral. Not because of the sexual act, but because I am betraying someone's, I'm betraying someone.
But also not because Heavenly Father sheds a tear or because angels will mark it in heaven. Just
because I would be hurting him.
Yeah, exactly.
I would be hurting him. And I said, and so that would be wrong because of that in my book. That doesn't mean, people don't do it or whatever. But, and maybe if one had an open marriage, some people can do that. I think it's very rarely does that work. But I wouldn't judge someone if they had that. But we don't have that. Most people can't have that. Most people would feel betrayed and hurt. And so to me, it's wrong. So basically, your morals come out of reason, what's good and what's bad. And in the sense of what hurts and what helps. And that to me is a lot less arbitrary than some God saying homosexuals can never have love in their life or are somehow evil or perverted. No, we now know anyway from science that it's just a normal occurrence that some people are going to be homosexual. And why shouldn't they have all the same things we have? That just makes sense. It's just reason. And so to me, I feel like in some ways, I am maybe more moral than before because now I can't just defer it to someone else. I have to think about it myself. What do I think? And I am accountable and responsible for what I choose and what I do. I can't say, well, the prophet said it or God said it.
And you're not doing it for some reward in heaven or out of some fear of a negative consequence. You're doing it because it's what you want to do. Exactly.
And like I was reading this nice little story by a German writer called Bertolt Brecht. He said that this man, Mr. Koiner, he was asked, do you believe in a God? And then Mr. Koiner said, well, does it make a difference whether you believe in God or not? If the answer is yes, then you need God. And I thought that was such a brilliant story.
That's really good.
I actually don't need one because it makes no difference to me. I would be the same person, but some people maybe do. Some people without a God would maybe go out and do all sorts of crazy things. And then it's better if they have one,
And they should be respected. I'm coming around to believing that belief should be respected. People tend to believe what they need and what they want and what brings them joy or safety or comfort. Mm-hmm. And we need to just be respectful of lots of different paths.
Yes. And, at the church also can be good for many people. Like this friend Isis, you know, it basically saved her when she was in a really dark place in her life. And so she feels, even though she has her own adaptation of the church, you know, she feels great loyalty and love for it. And, you know, so for her, it's a good place. And for many of my other friends too.
Part of why she's able to do it is because she's a Mormon on her own terms. And she really is.
Yes, she is. She is.
I know
some
of the
backstory. You know, why don't you just do that? She said to me, why don't you just do it like me? But she does. I told her that doesn't work for me. You know, I didn't grow up that way. I don't see any point in it. You know, it would be like a waste of time for me. I can't do that. But for her, it gives her something. And so it's fantastic. You know, and we have like this total respect for each other's path. And neither one of us finds the other one silly for doing that. You know, it's like, and I have some other friends like that, this mutual teacher that I mentioned earlier. And others, you know, that just to them, the church gives them a lot. So that's a good place for them. And I think that for my kids at this point still too, at least for my older two and possibly my youngest, you know, so as long as it's that way, I can support that, you know.
So one thing that was coming to mind earlier that I just wanted to state is one of the real important dynamics that happens between a mixed faith Mormon couple. You know, certainly marriage is hard enough without religious differences. And sometimes the marriage is just bad. And the faith crisis and the mixed faith marriage doesn't hurt the marriage. It reveals the marriage. It shines a huge spotlight on the marriage and shows all the blemishes and the weaknesses and the dysfunctions that were successfully hidden by this rigid, devout orthodoxy, where both of you are so committed to the church that you don't have time. You're so busy serving in callings and raising kids and working, you don't have time to actually look at the marriage and consider its health. And in that way, so many Mormon marriages are just dysfunctional, but no one has the time to even notice, or they just ignore it and self-medicate. That's why Utah has some of the highest rates of depression and prescription drug abuse and suicidality, especially even among women, not just youth, but women, because so many people are in these terrible, toxic, lifeless, intimacy-less marriages, and religion allows them to hide that. But once the faith crisis happens with one of the partners and the marriage is exposed for what it is, the believer is going to not be happy in the marriage, but the church won't allow them necessarily, unless they're encouraged explicitly to divorce their non-believing partner. They're going to not want to get divorced because family is the most important thing and you're supposed to hang on no matter what. So they're often willing to hang on to the marriage, even if it's miserable. And it's like, okay, well, our marriage sucks, but Mormons don't get divorced and families are eternal. So
I know several like this.
We'll just live separate lives. And, you know, that may work for some, but that's particularly difficult. It's sad for the believer, but it's also often a non-starter for the non-believer, because once the doubter non-believer has this faith crisis, they may not believe in an afterlife. They may not believe in a celestial kingdom. You know, they may believe that this is the only life that they're ever going to have. And in that case, just white knuckling a miserable, pathetic marriage is not tenable. They're like, I may only have 2 or 3 good decades left. And if I don't want to just be tolerated. I don't want to just be pitied. And I don't want to live as this disappointment to my spouse. I want to be celebrated and loved and embraced as a partner. And so, you know, sometimes a mixed faith marriage may lead to a divorce, but it's not because people aren't committed or they don't have integrity or character. It's because they don't want to choose to live a miserable existence with the few remaining years that they may have in existence. Did you relate to that?
Yeah. This is exactly what I said to Bill. I said, I am not enduring to the end anymore. You know, and it's exactly what you said. But even before my faith crisis, I have some friends like this that live in marriages like this. And it is just, oh, well, we've been married in the temple. We just kind of have to hold out. And I never wanted to do that. But maybe before I wouldn't have had the courage. I would have thought, well, I have to kind of, because it's the right thing to do. And now it's exactly like you said. I feel like I only have this life and I need to live it as best as I can. I need to live every moment and enjoy it. And I don't want to live in a loveless life, and especially not with someone that endures me, and I said that to Bill. I said, as long as you are angry with me, as long as you are so upset that you can barely look my way and I can't be myself, we can't, this won't work. But I said to him also, but I will give us time. I can't expect us, to be different from like that he can just overcome this in 1 week. But, having said that, time doesn't mean decades, And so it's, I want to be in a happy relationship. At the same time, though, I'm a bit of a realist, and I'm thinking, okay, being alone is also not so much fun. So I'm willing to work at it, or was willing, even when it was really difficult, because I felt it was worth trying. And plus, we have a family, there's our kids. They're grown, but still, it's like we belong together, and it would be very difficult on them too.
We have a lot of really wonderful comments coming in and questions, so I'm just going to read a few. Is that okay? Have a little dialogue?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So Jenny writes, keep showing up authentically. Quote, showing up creates your destiny, while not showing up creates your fate. So Jenny is arguing for a life of authenticity, I think.
Absolutely. I'm with you, Jenny.
Yeah. Victoria writes, I love Mormon stories so much. I love the honesty. I love the open and genuine conversations. It's a breath of fresh air. Victoria, maybe you're next. Maybe we need to interview you for Mormon Stories podcast. Absolutely. Let us know if you're interested. Jenny also writes, humans are starved for authentic love. And I call it emotional intimacy as well. Mm-hmm. We are starved for emotional intimacy. And I do retreats and workshops on this. And I talk a lot about this in my coaching. Mm-hmm. There's no such thing as a Relief Society lesson or an Elders Quorum lesson on emotional intimacy. The church doesn't talk about it. In fact, they've corrupted the term intimacy to be synonymous with sex. Mm-hmm. And so now there's just no talk in Mormonism about what the real core human need is for survival and thriving, and that's emotional intimacy. And so much of how we're raised in an Orthodox religion is actually, an enemy to or oppositional to what healthy emotional intimacy is, because at the core of emotional intimacy is this sort of foundation of safe, unconditional love. And if your love is conditioned on mutual agreement about the church and obedience to the church, then at its core, the love is not conditional, is not unconditional, it's conditional. And of course, you need to have similarities in values. You need to have an agreement about boundaries. So I'm not saying true unconditional love can exist in the sense that, you can't have a spouse that beats you and cheats on you and is a drug abuser, and you expect that to be a healthy, happy marriage. That's going to be a non-starter. So in one sense, I don't believe in true unconditional love. But in the other sense, after there's a basic fundamental agreement on values and boundaries and morals and standards, there cannot be a true, healthy emotional intimacy without unconditional love. And again, belief, especially in 2019, belief is so fragile. Religious belief is so tenuous. It is a fragile, sandy foundation upon which to build a marriage. And so no one should build their marriage in 2019 on religious belief, at least in the developed world, because we know with the rise of the nuns, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people are losing their religious faith daily, weekly, monthly, and are leaving their faith. And so if your marriage is built on religion, we sing that song in primary, the wise man builds his house upon the rock, the foolish man builds his house upon the sand. In 2019, to build your religion, to build your marriage on religion is to build your marriage on a sandy foundation that can and likely will erode from under your feet in a matter of years, if not months, if not weeks, because that's how tenuous it is. That's how tenuous religious belief is in the 21st century. Anyway, that's my little rant. Anything you want to say about that?
Only that I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
And I think that emotional intimacy is difficult when you're trying to fit a role and you can't be your true self. You know, you can't say what you really think or what you really feel because it might not be appropriate, or because you're somehow trying to be this person that maybe you're not. And this is one of the things that I've learned, you know, that I just can be myself now, you know, and it's okay. You know, like there was always this, even though I had decided not to really believe in all the guilt things anymore, I still very much bought into them. And only now, you know, I've started to like free myself of that and just think that also my positive and my negative feelings, they're all okay. They're just feelings that I had, you know, and now I have to figure out what I do with them. And I'm responsible for my actions with them. But it's not bad to feel jealous or angry or something like that. It's just part of the human experience. And how can you be authentic when you don't allow yourself to have these feelings? You know, I shouldn't feel that, you know, and I should only be like this. And then you can't really connect, you know.
Tamara writes that she and her husband or spouse or partner, I'm not sure who, they're getting along so much better because Tamara's requiring so much less perfection of herself and of her partner. Exactly. She's admitting that she doesn't hold him to unnatural standards, and now she can just love her partner for who he is. So that's another vote from Tamara for a more unconditional love instead of a conditional love that's stressed out by both people trying to live up to unattainable levels of perfection.
Yeah. And, you know, I noticed that one of the times when I went back to church because of something that the kids had, you know, and I stayed for the entire 3 hours. And in the last lesson was Relief Society. And I was like 20 minutes into Relief Society and I felt all guilty again. And I thought, what's going on, you know? And I already thought I should do this, I should do that. And it wasn't even related to what she was talking about. And then I realized what was happening. And I thought, stop, you know, no, you're okay the way you are. And that doesn't mean I can't do more in my life or do other things, but I'm okay, you know.
You're whole. You're whole. You're
whole.
Perfect in your imperfection, right?
Yes, yes. And it was just interesting how that got triggered right away when I was there again by stuff that was being said. And yeah,
because that wiring, that conditioning runs really deep. Tamara also says she's so glad she stumbled onto this podcast. So many similarities to her life. Tamara, share it with everyone. Let the whole world know Mormon Stories is here to support people. We're glad you joined us. PJ writes, I'm glad our marriage was just not all about church, and discovering that that and so much more is so helpful. Yes, and my morals are mine and come from me and not a specific church. That's such a beautiful realization when we realize that we can be moral because we want to be moral, and that the church has no monopoly on morality, which someone shared earlier. People are loving your comment that people should be chosen over myth, right? That the church really is a myth. And that doesn't mean, that's not even meant to be derogatory. It's just the stories that we're taught in the Bible, in the Old Testament, the New Testament. Check out David Bokavoy's interview. The Old Testament, the New Testament, the Book of Mormon, it's all pseudepigrapha, it's all myth, it's all story, and none of it's really historical in a historical sense. And so people should always trump religion, always.
Right.
People should be loved.
And myths can be uplifting and can be, you know, inspiring and
Les Miserables.
I mean, I love fiction. I mean, after all, I'm a German literature teacher. I love literature, you know, and so and we can learn a lot. I mean, there are still truths from these myths to be learned, you know, absolutely.
Oh, it's like Les Miserables. What's more true than Les Miserables, right?
Exactly. But when you start taking them literally, that's when they become dangerous. because then it's like here it said that, if you shouldn't eat pork or whatever, you pick out. And then you can go all the way to the Taliban where, a woman gets stoned because you're taking something literal.
Joe wants to know from you, Anna, what gives your life meaning now that you don't believe in the church or even necessarily in a God or an afterlife? What gives your life meaning now? And how is that different from the period of your church membership? Thanks, Joe, for the question.
Okay. Yeah, that was hard at first. There was sort of like this void. So if all of this isn't true, how do I find meaning? And but I found I still believe in some kind of a spirituality, and that means like I love meditating. I love secular Buddhism. I love trying to live in the now and experience every moment more fully, more aware, more awake, and that it feels like it's like a new life. It feels like I feel much more awake and alive than I did before. And that's my meaning. So the meaning is now what I give it, to love myself, to love other people, to love the whole planet, and the animals on it, and everything, to just make this a better world. And while I was saying earlier, when I was 20 and I was reading Nietzsche and all those things, it scared me to no end that maybe there is no God and that there is no afterlife. But now it doesn't scare me anymore. It's okay for me now, because I love my life now. I love my relationships. I love all the experiences that I have, and that's what I get my meaning from. Of course, sometimes I am sad that this will not continue forever.
Maybe.
I don't think it does, but maybe I'm open that maybe it does.
Right.
That would be a wonderful surprise. But and so there are moments when I'm sad about this. It is the basic human predicament, that we die. But at the same time, it also gives this life so much preciousness. It's like so special because it is limited. It does end. Probably if you went on and on forever and ever here, we wouldn't value it as much. I don't know. So at least I feel like I value every moment a lot more than I did before. And so, yeah.
Lisa asks, why are we just talking about dysfunctional marriage? Why aren't we also talking about dysfunctional families? She's saying that sometimes we get so caught up in Mormonism and serving that we lose focus and don't realize that our way of being Mormon can destroy a family, not just a marriage.
Yeah. And
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say earlier that I feel like I have a much better relationship with my kids now than I did before. I was like always worried about them. What if they don't stay in the church? What if they don't get married in the temple? What if they fall away? Like that, I was like almost.
What if they try a beer? What if they have sex?
Oh my gosh, what if something happens and now I don't have that anymore. It's so weird. I feel a lot less afraid than I did before. And I don't understand the paradox of this. Before, when I believed in a loving Heavenly Father, I was
all powerful.
Yes.
Loving Heavenly Father, right?
I am less afraid now because now I just know, I know there's bad stuff in the world. Bad stuff sometimes happens, good stuff happens, but you can always like make the best of whatever happens. You take what comes and you adapt and you live with that. And like, I feel now so open about my kids. They can do whatever they want, whatever they choose. And it's all fine with me. It's like exciting to watch what they do. And when they make mistakes, they make mistakes. And when they do great things, then I'm happy. And it's like, I feel much more relaxed about it. So, yeah, I think the way it was before, even though I felt we had a good family, there was a certain dysfunctionality in it that it was controlling. Like I tried from very early on to just get them on this one path. Obviously, I was quite successful at it since they're still there. But even that's fine, you know, if that's what they want to do and if that's where they're happy. Yeah.
Right.
So I feel a lot more or a lot less worried than I did before.
Glenn writes, he appreciates us saying that believers should be respected as well. Glenn says, in his experience, some of the ex-Mormon groups that he has found are less than accepting of believers in God and Christ. Most were atheists, and I would have been just as comfortable going to church with my lack of Mormon belief and being judged there, but giving the choice, I don't want to go to either. In other words, he's saying sometimes ex-Mormons can be less tolerant or just as intolerant as believing Mormons. And he's grateful that Mormon Stories is a place that strives to be affirming of both non-belief and belief. And thanks, Glenn, for saying that. Mm-hmm. And we do try and do that, and we've always tried to do that.
Yeah. And this is something that has helped me a lot from listening to Mormon Stories, you know, just seeing so different points of views. And sometimes they were uncomfortable, you know, they were uncomfortable. Let's say, you know, the Denver snuffer people. And to me, it was like a bit uncomfortable. But then, you know, I thought, why? You know, I can respect that too. If somebody wants, it wouldn't be for me, but that's okay. Nobody's forcing me, you know. And if that is true for them and makes them happy, that's okay too, you know. So yeah, you're this. I think it was Glenn, right? Yeah. It's very right that sometimes one just becomes the same on the other side, you know, as if you've just been reversed, and now you're trying to get everyone to leave the church and to see how horrible it is, and like, that's, I think that's just as bad.
It's like a reverse missionary.
Yeah, yeah.
Sarah writes, getting rid of the elephant in the room by being yourself and saying what you feel is great advice. She says, I always hate the feeling of that elephant being there. It's true. Mm-hmm. Families and marriages should be the place where everything can be discussed. There should be no elephant in the room that isn't addressed immediately. And it's toxic to live with emotions and major issues unaddressed. It kills you. It eats away. It causes depression. It causes anxiety. It can cause physical disorders that emerge from the internal stress that you experience. So you can literally develop physical illnesses and ailments when you internalize emotions and don't talk about things you need to talk about and hide and cover up what you're thinking, what you're feeling.
And I just simply didn't want to live that way. I just don't, you know. And so I felt like there were moments when I felt like I had ended up in the wrong life. You know, I thought felt like one morning I woke up and it was the wrong life. You know, I didn't fit. You know, I felt like a misfit in my own life, and that was a horrible feeling.
And it's also horrible to feel like your kids look down on you. Your kids feel like you're a disappointment. What was that like?
Well, like you just said, horrible. Yeah. And especially, you know, having come from the family I did, and I worked so hard at having a great relationship with my kids. And I had that, you know, and I think they're wonderful kids. And we had such a good relationship, absolutely wonderful. They talked to me about everything I felt, and I talked to them. And then all of a sudden, I did this to them. And it was very disrupting to them. And it really shook their whole world. And it upset me that I had to do this to them. And it was like my sister-in-law wrote to me. She's my brother's wife. After a few months had passed, she wrote to me this message saying, you know, every night since I had left, or since my brother had told her, she had cried every night. And how could I make my kids suffer like this? You know, and it was like, I was so upset by this message, you know, and of course I don't believe she cried every night. I really don't. But that she had to put this guilt on me. You've made your kids suffer. yeah, I finally I wrote back that was, I was just trying to be true to myself. And I knew that my kids had a hard time with it, but that was between them and me. And I think that it was good for them in the long run too, you know, because they learned a lot. They have become better people because of it. It's like one time Natasha, who's my oldest, the one that's married, my oldest girl, one of her visiting teachers was giving her some kind of a lesson about, you know, what to do when we have unbelieving family members and stuff. And Natasha was sort of half listening. And then she said, "Are you talking about my mom?"
Yeah.
Said, "Well, yeah, you know, isn't that really hard?" She says, "No, that's not hard. My mom has chosen a different path and it's better for her. And I support her and I don't want her to come back." You know, and then when she told me this, I said, "Good for you." I couldn't believe it. It touched me so much. You know, and she teaches primary kids, and she, like, what, 11-year-olds. And this one 11-year-old asked her, "My aunt doesn't go to church anymore. Why doesn't she believe anymore?" And then Natasha said, "Well, my mom doesn't go either. The church isn't right for everyone." You know, and I said, "Well, you said that?" You know? And so it shows that they have become more open, more accepting, and they're teaching that also in the church. That's bringing in a different culture. And so, and now, you know, they were challenged again when Alina came back from her mission early, and they were so loving and supportive. You know, nobody in the family gave her the feeling that she had failed or that somehow she should have stayed longer. You know, they were like so supportive, and they were just all saying how happy they were she was here and how courageous she had been, and, you know, to do what she felt was the right thing for her. And so, yes, they were suffering, but then that's part of the human condition. And they learned and they grew.
Yeah.
But while you see them suffer and you know you're the cause of it, it's really hard.
Penny actually says that she and her husband were on a panel for the church a few months ago on emotional intimacy. So that's really good to hear.
Cool.
The church is waking up.
Yeah.
Michael says, thanks to us both. He really enjoys these perspectives. PJ writes, she agrees, do not build your marriage on a religion. Mm-hmm. PJ writes, it's freeing to be yourself. Shelley writes, my marriage finally began to be real after I left the church. I love my husband so much more. And Shelley adds, the sex is way better. So thank you for sharing, Shelley. We're happy for you and your husband. Shelley also says she lost 60 pounds after she stopped believing. So that's called the ex-Mormon diet, is what that's called.
Oh, okay.
Nancy writes, unconditional love does not require a person to stay in an abusive relationship. You can still love them unconditionally, but be out of the situation. And that's true. Sometimes these relationships can get abusive, and we don't encourage that to stay in abusive relationships. So many comments from listeners. Tasha writes, the meaning of life is whatever meaning you give it. When you have less of it, not thinking or believing you are getting another one makes you automatically value it more. That's right, Tasha. That's what many people end up finding. Tamara writes, the morals were brought up when I told my husband I was never going back. When I left, I realized I was good without religion. One of the quotes that helped me realize how damaging the church was came from Sherry Dew. She made a comment in a book about our fallen nature that is bad. And then she writes, we are naturally bad, ? My soul screamed no. Empathy came before religion. So Tamara's rejecting the idea that we're all, the traditional Christian idea that we're all fallen and irredeemable before God.
Yeah, I like this so much better than now. I think of myself not as a fallen person, the natural man that has to somehow get back, but I think of myself now as whole and just sometimes confused. Sometimes I do stuff that's not so good because I don't know better. but not because I'm bad. You know, it's
Right.
like underneath, I'm just good and whole. And that's such a different perspective.
Yeah. You're fundamentally whole and complete, not broken and bad.
Exactly.
Brandon asks, he says, so many people have gone beyond the church and left, all tell their story and sound so happy, like their life is full. Is there anything bad with not being a part of the church anymore? Anna, is it all rainbows and gumdrops and lollipops and jelly beans?
Of course. No,
That's a good
no,
question,
no,
Brandon.
no.
Are we just polishing a turd? Are we just making it sound awesome when it's really tragic and sad?
Well, no. I think there's some of both. Of course, you're going to have down days, and it's been almost 5 years, and it's a lot better now. But you know, had I done this interview after 1 year, I would have not had much positive to say. You know, so at first it's really hard. It's like you've lost a loved one. You know, and that thing of grief, you really go through that. I was in denial. I was angry. I was angry for quite some time, and then I was really depressed. And that's as recent as last September, October, etc. And actually all summer and like into October, I was just feeling so down. I thought, well, what's there to live for anymore? And this relationship is difficult, and my kids don't need me anymore, and this kind of thing. And of course I had good days, but there was like this general feeling it's pointless. Then I went and researched on grief, and I realized, oh, you're just going through this. And that actually helped. It gave me some distance. I thought, okay, you're gonna get better. And I did. And I can't say it was one day or something, but of course one has throwbacks, but generally I feel like now I can accept this now, and I am now excited about life. But they were difficult things. And, there's the community that was nice that sometimes you miss until you find a new one. And I think what was the hardest thing to miss or to lose was this certainty. Everything was clear and it made sense. And there was going to be this life after death. And I was going to become a god, and I was going to learn ballet, and learn every instrument and do all these fun things. And that's kind of sad to give up. I did the Camino de Santiago after I lost my faith. That's the way in Spain to go all through Spain and to go to Santiago de Compostela. It's a Catholic pilgrimage. And I did that just as a way of a spiritual journey and stuff. And I met this guy from New York who had been a former Jesuit. And he got so excited when he heard that I was a Mormon who had lost her faith. And we talked for like hours and hours for 8 days, and very interesting talks. And I explained all the stuff about Mormonism to him, and I told him about the plan of salvation. And when he heard it, he said, wow, that's amazing. That's so cool. And he says, and you gave all that up for coffee? And there were moments when it felt like that, that I had given up all this fantastic story for what? For coffee and an occasional tonic or something, But of course, I didn't, I gained so much more. I gained freedom to choose my own life. Now there's not just this one path, I can do all these different things. I feel like it's much more exciting now. And like, for example, should I tell now what I've planned for the?
Yeah, let's do it. We have about, the Facebook live stream ends at 4 hours. So
How much do we have?
We have 8 minutes left. We should
okay.
push
well,
for
then
7.
I will tell it now.
Yeah.
it's just like I am planning on going. I've taken this unpaid leave from work for 3 months, and I'm planning to go to India, Sri Lanka, Thailand by myself. And it's something I wanted to do when I was young. I wanted to travel like this, but it wasn't in the plan. You know, it was like going on a mission, getting married, having children. And I don't think I would have done that had I left the church. It wouldn't have been in the plan. It's not something you do, you know. But now I am doing that. And, you know, that's the thing. These kinds of options are open to me now. And I am super excited about it. And excited to what I will do afterwards too. And it was kind of hard for Bill to, you know, accept that, but he is doing that now. He's realizing it's really important to me. And so, yeah, not everything is rosy, but at the moment I'm very excited because I get to fulfill one of my dreams. And I want to write a book, and hopefully I will do that too.
You absolutely must write a book. You are a born author, and brilliant and wise. And everybody who's listened to today's episode will agree. I forbid you to not write a book.
Okay, I will do it. So yeah, that's basically.
That's going to be your eat, pray, love moment, but maybe without the love. Is that right? Or maybe without the praying. It'll just be eating.
I'm get sick, maybe. But yeah, no, I'm going to a meditation center. So there will be some of that praying.
Secular praying.
Exactly.
Mindfulness.
And love in the more general sense, right?
Love of self.
Love of self and love of meeting new people and all that.
And love of mankind and the universe.
Exactly.
Well, there are so many amazing comments pouring in. We're not going to be able to read them all. I just want to refer any of our listeners to the comments. There's so many good things people are saying.
I'll have to go read them.
Yeah, great stuff. I wish we could address them all. I want to thank all our listeners today for joining in. You guys made everything better. I'll read Martine's comment. She writes, great conversation with a wonderful woman. I too moved away from Mormon faith while my husband served as bishop. He was understandably defensive at the time, but fortunately, except for his mission, he was never a literal believer. So even as a bishop, he was very open to different ways of believing, but was still shocked to discover how far I'd strayed from the Mormon path, even from believing in God. But I've been so fortunate since we are now pretty much on the same page. We love you, Martine. Cool. We're so happy that that was the outcome for you. We want to encourage all our listeners to have hope, to don't give up on your believing family and friends. Don't give up on your marriage. Don't give up on yourself. You can find healing. You can find joy. Listen to other faith crisis narratives on Mormon Stories and elsewhere. Find a coach, find a therapist, find community, and hold on and do the work. And you can find out that this faith crisis is a gift, that it improves your life, improves your mental health. You can lose weight. You can have better sex. You can have a better marriage. You can, it can become the best thing that ever happened to you. And by the way, that doesn't mean you have to leave the church. There are plenty of people that go through a faith crisis, stay in the church, and just have a healthier relationship with themselves and the church and their spouse while staying in. That's all possible. And that's what the Gift of the Faith Crisis podcast is about. Check us out there at mormonfaithcrisis.com. And that's what the events are that we hold. And that's what Mormon Stories is about. So we want to thank everyone who's made Mormon Stories possible, all the donors, the board of directors, Cody Layton, who does our editing, and you, our listeners. Please do all you can to support Mormon Stories by liking our Facebook page, by giving us a positive review. Same on iTunes. Supporting us financially, you can donate to Mormon Stories by clicking on the donate button at the top right. 10, 20, 50, $100 a month, whatever you can afford. If you love this programming, if you value it, please support it. It makes a difference. What do you want to leave us with as we just have a few minutes left, 2 minutes left on how would you like to end this episode?
Well, it's just a thought that came through my head as you were talking. It's like there's as many paths as there are people. There is not one path for everyone. And I think everyone should be able to find their own path. And that's the exciting thing. And we can allow other people to have their path, and we can support them in their path. And to me, that's just wonderful. That's what I've learned. I've become so much more open of all sorts of different walks of life and paths. So, and thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and also especially hearing all the comments. And thanks for all of your support. So
yeah, and thank you for being my friend, Anna. I consider you a dear friend, and I'm grateful to know you, and I'm grateful for Bill. I'm grateful for your wonderful children. I've met 2 or 3 of the 4, I think, and I love your family. So I hope we can hang out more in the weeks, years, months ahead.
I hope so.
Go ahead.
No, I was only going to say, I forgot to say what I really wanted to say is also that I'm really grateful for Sam Young, who came to Switzerland and was my first person to talk to here. So just connected by, accident, I saw him on Facebook and saw that he's in Switzerland, and he did a little talkeria for me, or with me. And that was such a tremendous moment that there was somebody I could talk to here in Switzerland. So I'm very grateful for him too. So shout out to Sam.
Absolutely. We love Sam and we support him, and thanks for that.
Absolutely.
And if any of you in Europe want to hold a workshop or retreat in 2019, reach out to me. We just need someone to organize it and plan it. And we're putting a little committee together. We would love to bring a faith crisis workshop or retreat to Europe because so many people need it there. I didn't realize
and I will be going.
Yeah. So thank you. And so please reach out at Dr. John DeLynn or mormonfaithcrisis@gmail.com or mormonstories@gmail.com. However you reach out because we want to bring these events not only to Europe, but wherever you live. If you need a faith crisis workshop, please don't hesitate to reach out and we'll bring one to wherever you live. All right. Love you, Anna. Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you.
Our love to Bill and your wonderful family. And again, thanks to all our listeners who tuned in today. Please email us at mormonstories@gmail.com with any questions or comments. And please continue supporting us. It makes all the difference in the world. Take care, everybody. Love you. And we'll see you again soon on Mormon Stories Podcast. Take care.
Hey, bye-bye.